My name's Jason Goodwin. I'm the author of a detective series set in 19th century Istanbul. The investigator is called Yashim. He's an Ottoman gentleman, a fabulous cook, he's fast, and he's quiet. Yashim arrived early at the little restaurant beneath Galata Point and chose a quiet alcove which overlooked the channel of the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus had made Istanbul what it was, the junction of Europe and Asia, the pathway from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean, the great entrepot of world trade from ancient times to the present day. From where he sat, he could watch the waterway he loved so much, the narrow sheet of gunmetal which reflected back the shape of the city it had built. The water was as ever thick with shipping. A mountain of white sail rose above the deck of an Ottoman frigate which was tacking up the straits. A shoal of fishing smacks, broad-beamed and single-masted, held out under an easterly wind for the Sea of Marmara. A customs boat swept past on its long red oars like a scurrying water beetle. There were ferries and skiffs and overladen barges, lateen-rigged cutters from the Black Sea coast, houseboats moored by the crowded entrance to the Golden Horn. Across the jostling waterway, Yashim could just make out Üsküdar on the opposite shore, the beginning of Asia. 1,500 years of grandeur, 1,500 years of power, 15 centuries of corruption, coups and compromises. A city of mosques, churches, synagogues, of markets and emporia, tradesmen, soldiers, beggars. The city to beat all cities, overcrowded and greedy. Yashim stopped by the fish market on the Golden Horn. Still smarting from the Frenchman's indifference to the dolma he'd so lovingly prepared, he chose 2 lüfer, the blue fish which all Istanbul took as the standard for excellence. He watched the fishmonger slit their bellies and remove the entrails with a twist of his thumb. Yashim was proud of Istanbul, proud of its markets, the cornucopia of perfect fruits and vegetables that poured into them every day, proud of the fat-tailed sheep from Anatolia which sometimes came skittering and bleating through the narrow streets. What other city in the world could produce fish to match the freshness or the variety offered by the Bosphorus, a finny highway running straight through the heart of Istanbul? Why, at any season of the year you could practically walk to Üsküdar on the torrent of fish which passed along the straits. "Don't wash it," he said quickly. A fish would begin to deteriorate from the moment it lost its slimy protective coat. "Ah, we have too little water," the fishmonger grunted. "The supply is weak again." But it flowed, that was what mattered. Sometimes, standing on Pera Hill and looking back across the Golden Horn to the familiar skyline of the city, marked by the great domes of Sinan's mosques, or passing the jumble of buildings, mosques, houses, caravanserais, churches, covered markets, shops, which lined the Istanbul shore of the Horn, it seemed incredible to Yashim that the city should function from one day to the next, and not simply explode or tear itself apart, or at the very least subside into a confusion of bleating sheep, rotting vegetables, and men gesticulating and thundering in 20 languages, unable to progress or retreat through the overcrowded streets. Yashim descended the hill by the Sublime Port and crossed in front of the new mosque, where he'd found the litter bearers the night before. Passing the entrance to the Egyptian bazaar, he hesitated and then plunged in. The rich aromas of cinnamon and cloves, of cumin, coriander and pounded ginger made his head whirl. Mountains of vividly coloured powder rose on every stall, pungent spices gathered from all across the world, from the coasts of India and the mountains of China, from Persia and Arabia and the islands of the South Seas, brought here to this great entrepot of the world's trade by dhow, by carrack, by camel train and mule train, over deserts, through wild seas, crossing the passes of legendary mountain ranges, bartered and bought, fought for and pilfered, growing ever more valuable and rare, until at last they reached this market on the edge of Europe, and vanished into a soup or a dish of rice. Yashim paused, dizzied by the reflection. What a world men had made! What adventures they undertook, simply to give colour and pungency to their diet! The bazaar was a treasure house, yet nothing would be changed if a wind scattered the powder to the skies. No one would starve, empires would not fall. The very stones of the bazaar would reek of spices 1,000 years from now. What of it? For something as trivial and evanescent, men could be killed. For an idea as immaterial as the scents which rose from the multicoloured hillocks of ground seeds, people were prepared to die. An immigrant in the city, struggling to better himself and provide for his children, disappeared. For what? Nothing stolen, as it seemed. No one ate better. But perhaps an idea had been realized, a dream had been served. Lefebvre, dead in the street. No money on him, nothing taken. Killed for a book, perhaps. A few scraps of observation about a city that no longer existed, the thoughts and memories of men long since dead and gone. The city still lived and breathed, and ate and slept. A pilaf could be eaten without saffron.